You guys can have a seat. Man, as we come into this place and get to worship like that, and just thinking about our first service and the way that things went and what we've got this morning, you guys are in for a treat. We have got such an awesome morning, but the story is always the same. It's that everybody in here's got a before and an after, and so like the way that we think about that oftentimes is how our lives change and how people come in and out of them and all of that. But as far as our lives go and the story that God builds in us, man, He is never done with us. So whatever you're here this morning, you're here for a reason, and so we're really excited about this morning. You picked an awesome Sunday to come as we're going to this morning look at the way that some intersection of some lives and some stories, and it's just good stuff. One quick announcement: if you are ever driving by here on a Wednesday, you'll see that there are just a ton of cars out here. We have got our Flood and Rush ministries that meet right here in this room, so we'll have 60-something kids crawling all over the place. It's a wonder that the lights and everything are still functional because they're throwing footballs and going bananas in here. That's God working in the lives of our students, and we're blessed to have a bunch of them. And right now we're actually we had a meeting last night talking about what camps look like for this year. So we're in the process of planning those, and if you have a kid and they're anywhere from kindergarten up, we've got a camp for them, particularly our high school kids. So if you on April the 14th, it's a Sunday. We'd love it if you guys would put that on your calendars. So if you put your calendar stuff in one of these like I do, that's April 14th. There's a fundraiser that we're going to do right after second service. It'll be a lunch. We'll have an auction, silent auction, and some other things. And so a couple of things on that. One, we want you here. We want you here to just come and hang and hang out with your church family and support what we do as a ministry. But then second, if you've got, something that maybe you would think would be good for a silent auction, our friends Jeremy and Stephanie Chambers are the ones that will be heading that up, and so you can come talk to me or any of them. But April 14th, that's a big date for us because it really sets the course for what we can do that we feel like God is calling us to do with our student ministry and taking them to camp. So that's really the only announcement this morning, other than that we've got a brand new series that starts next week that takes us to Easter. Like, that's crazy to me that we are that close. We're 7 weeks from Easter starting next week, but that series and everything that God, we feel, is doing in our midst as a church, that He's preparing us for something, and so never knowing what that might be, we're always humble and gracious and looking for what's next. And so we'd love it if you come back next week and check out this next series. Check out this video.
So every once in a while, we'll come before you like this. I'll grab some people to join me up here, and we'll tell a story. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to tell a story. I told the first service, there's a few things that we all have in common up here. First of all, I consider all these people my friends. Second of all, none of these people want to be up here. I'm just saying. That's the only thing I don't have in common with you. I have to be up here. But you guys, they don't want to be up here. The other thing is we're all Chiefs fans. You heard there's a game today. And so except for these two, they're not Chiefs fans. But we love them anyway. They love the Broncos. We'll pray for them right now. Father, no, just kidding. But yeah, the other thing is like we're all local. We all of us either graduated from Branson, Forsyth, or Hollister, and so that's kind of cool. One thing that we don't have in common is that we all have different upbringings when it comes to church, when it came to how we kind of grew up. And I think it's a picture of all of us here at the River. Let's start with you, Jason. You grew up what? Catholic. You grew up Catholic. So now I know for a fact that Mindy and I, so she is my cousin, so we've known each other since I've been born. And do we want to tell that story again? Yeah, I'm going to tell this story. I have to tell this story. So Mindy's my cousin. When we were little, she was sick, and my mom thought it would be a great idea to bring all three of us boys over to your house while you were sick. Anyway, you were sick, and your dad made a piece of a countertop into a circle, and would use that kind of as a TV tray, sitting on the floor and eating, watching TV. And she was doing that, bless her little sick heart, and she was in the floor. And when she was all done and she was laying down there beside it, I thought, this would make a great toy. It would make a great wheel. So I grabbed it and I rolled it across the floor, and the thing was heavy. And it smacked her in the head, nearly knocked her out. And my mom was so mad at me that she jerked me up and she said, "Say you're sorry." And I refused. I said, "I'm not going to say I'm sorry because that was fun." And she said, "Say you're sorry." She whipped my bottom, and she goes, "Say you're sorry." And she whipped me again, and I cried, and I said, "No!" And she whipped me some more, to the point where poor Mindy goes, "Hey, can you just stop? Like, you don't have to whip him anymore." And I realized that I think we were camping or something, weren't we? And we were talking about that story, and she goes, "You know, you never said you were sorry." And I was like 18 years old, and I'm like, "I didn't?" And I'm like, "Well, you've been really holding on to this, haven't you?" So I looked at her and I said, "I'm so sorry, Mindy," and she accepted the apology, and we're better because of it today. I don't know why I told that story. Anyway, let me introduce us real quick. I didn't get to that, and then we'll get back to our church upbringing. This is Jeff. This is Rachel. This is Harriet. This is Keith. I'm Paul. This is Charlie. This is Mindy, and that's Jason. And we are here to tell a story today. Not that story, but we're here to tell a better story than even that one. So Mindy and I went to the same church as kids, grew up in that church, a Pentecostal church, a small Pentecostal church. And Rachel went there with us. And so we went to church together. That's kind of cool. Now, the other thing that we have in common is that, I forgot to say this is our home church. Like, we consider this, the River, our home church. And that's why we're all up here today to tell this story. So I already just told on you. You didn't have to answer. God bless your soul. You're welcome. Charlie, what was your church upbringing?
I didn't have any church upbringing. I accepted Christ in 2020 and was baptized. That's where it began. That's where that story begins.
Wow, that's awesome. So you're a fresh one. Just off about 4 years you've been saved and known Jesus. That's awesome. Keith, what about you?
I grew up Assembly of God and then took about a 15-year hiatus.
15-year hiatus from church, okay. Harriet?
Baptist.
Grew up Baptist, okay. Rachel, I already told your story, so you get to get out
So grew up early in the First Baptist Church in Branson, and then moved on to the Presbyterian Church until I was about 13, and probably for the last 35-ish years, I haven't been going to church until I got here.
Yeah. That's awesome. So see, again, it's just like I think that everyone in this room can relate, because you've got a story, you've got a background, you've come from somewhere when it comes to church. And I want to get to the story kind of more of what brought us here. And so in order to do that, we have to start with with you, Charlie. So your husband, you were married to Dub for how long? How long were you married? I know, I had to ask you, didn't I? 18 years? Wasn't it 18?
No, it wasn't 18. We were married 14 years?
14 years?
I think 14 years.
Okay, married Dub. And so Dub was a childhood friend of mine. And then everybody here considered Dub a friend, and that's kind of why we're here. That's why we're going to tell this story. So if you could just kind of shed some light on Dub's story, because he has an amazing story of where he came from, what he went through. What was his upbringing was Baptist. I remember he went to a small Baptist church. So
right.
Go ahead and start there.
Right. In 1991, he had a family tragedy where his mom shot him and his dad and both of his sisters.
And then shot herself.
And then shot herself. He was the only one who survived. And he was 17, almost 18. So you can imagine that's a lot to deal with at that age. He ended up actually moving in with the Youngs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jason is essentially his brother.
Yeah. So Justin was Jason's little brother. Justin, it was best friends with Dub. They were
Right.
best friends growing up from there. So it was just an easy move for him. So talk about that a little bit, Jason. Like all of a sudden, your guys' life, like you went through this tragedy. And I'll say this too: this was a small town. Branson was a small town, and we all remember that tragedy. Harriet and Rachel and I we were going to graduate with Mary Beth, Dub's little sister, and you guys were friends with Mary Beth. And so it affected us all. We remember that day at school and being in this community. It rocked us. We were like, what just happened? This doesn't happen in our town. And so for you, it became really personal because now Dub is going to move in with your family. You guys essentially adopted him into your family.
Yeah, strange events. I mean, what do you do? Nobody, that's not something that happens normally. So, brother's friend. I'd known him forever too, so
Yeah.
he fit in as well as anybody could at that minute.
Yeah.
Don't know if that was the greatest, but it was the only.
Yeah, it was.
It was the only. You
Yeah.
know, so you did what you should do. So,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
That's what I was asking first service. I asked Jason first service. I said, what compelled you guys to do that? And Jason said, it was the right thing to do. Like, that's just what you did. He was our family. He was at your house all the time. And so you guys took him in. Dub and I continued to be friends, and we hung out a lot. And I even went to church with him one time, and his mom raised him in a strict Baptist home. And then this rocked him to the core.
Right. Which obviously, or maybe not obviously, but he really withdrew spiritually.
Yeah.
I think, it wasn't not something he could just get past. I mean, he wasn't what you would say going to church every time the doors opened anymore, I think there was just a lot of bitterness, I think is the word you used first service, towards his mom, which, kept him from being
in church.
Yeah.
We had talked to, even when it happened, I remember, driving around and he would talk very little about this situation, but it was like going to church was not something he wanted to do because he grew up in that home. I mean, I think she barely let them watch TV kind of thing. Like it was a strict Baptist home. And then when she did that, he was like, the two don't mix, like church and this is about Jesus, and then my mom did this. And so it really messed him up. I remember when you guys met, and I've told you this, and I would tell you this again. We met at the tire shop. I think we decided that we all kind of met you at the tire shop. And the tire shop, Jason's dad owned, and everybody that wanted to be somebody or wanted to be cool or wanted to be around cool people went to the tire shop. We solved a lot of the world's problems in the tire shop. And it still happens today.
It was better then, wasn't it?
It was better. The world was better then.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
But the tire shop was a cool place, and that's where, and so that's where I would talk to Dub and meet and get to catch up with Dub over the years. Even my wife would say, like, I would be late to pick up our kids at daycare, and the woman would call Tennille, and she'd be like, "Where is your husband?" And she goes, "He's probably at the tire shop." And that's where it was. The kids can wait. We were solving problems. Right. So, but that's where we met. I remember meeting you for the first time at Star Shop. And when I met you, I knew that you were so good. I think everybody would agree. You were the right person for Dub to meet. And he began to, you probably heard more of what he was dealing with than anybody, even though he was still kind of closed off to a lot of that stuff. You want to talk any about that?
Yeah, I mean, there were times if we're being blunt, there were times that when we were dating, he would call me 3 sheets to the wind and say, I need to go to the cemetery. And I'd say, okay. And I would pick him up and take him. And he'd get out and just sit and cry for a while. I'd just sit in the car and wait, and he'd get back in the car and say, okay, I can go home now. And he did that off and on. But as our relationship grew, we got married. A lot of it changed, I think, when we had our first daughter, because I think for the first time he was able to look at her and see life does go on. Like there's my legacy, and she looked, like him and favored his family, and I think that he could see that.
Yeah,
and
growth.
it was growth. Yeah, for sure.
I saw that too. I saw that begin to change some. Now, and then so after that tragedy, after that happened, he skated out of town. Like he just had to get out. I remember I was told the first service, I went to college for a short time because of Dub, because I was at a gas station, barely getting by, I think, and he pulls up and he goes, what are you doing, Paulie? He called me Paulie. He said, Paulie, what are you doing? I said, man, I'm answering obvious questions. I'm putting gas in my car. What are you doing? He goes, I'm going to sign up for college. You should come with me, and we're going to go sign up for college. And I was like, okay. So we went, and his aunt was kind of up in the ladder of the college people there, and he got me in there. He goes, hey, Aunt so-and-so, Paul's going to sign up for college today. She goes, today? Like, today's the day. And he's like, I know, but he's going to do it today. So we signed up, and I went home afterwards, and I walked in, and my mom goes, man, you were sure a long time getting gas. I said, Mom, I signed up for college today. She said, you did what? And that was so I went to college, but the problem was Dub was so influential in my life that there were pretty days he goes, man, it sure is nice outside. Let's skip some class and go to the lake. And we did, only he was super smart, and he passed the pop quiz the next day, and I did not. So I failed college. I went to college because of Dub, and I failed college because of Dub.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just going to blame it on him. So after that, I remember him telling me this, he just had to get out of town for a while.
Right. I think, dealing with that tragedy as an 18, 19-year-old was probably not the healthiest way of dealing with it. So he knew he needed to get out of town. And so he left to go to school. He was gone 10 years going to school, various places. But I think it was a good break for him, because he always told me, if I don't get out of town, I'm always going to be that guy. And nobody's going to forget that. Wow. And that was not what he wanted to do. And as he went to college, he always wanted to be a history professor. You said he was smart. He was probably the smartest man I ever knew.
He was was he not the smartest guy in the room when you were there? Yeah. And he would tell you he's the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
He decided to go into law.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what led him to being a prosecutor was being a victim of a violent crime like he was, and just kind of being in those shoes and thinking that he could do something to help
make a difference.
Other people, make a difference, is kind of what led him to be a prosecutor, which is what actually essentially got him back home. He worked on Capitol Hill for a little while, and didn't really think that's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to stay in D.C., and so a job opportunity opened up back home in Taney County. And it felt like the right time to come back.
Yeah.
So he took an assistant prosecutor's job, and that's what actually got him back here and how I met him.
So cool. And I think it's such a great story, even if we stopped there, because of what he went through and what he still accomplished. But only a guy like him could do that. Like, he was so smart. And we all knew he had that in him, and we all knew that he had that potential to do that. And then he helped me out a lot in the legal field. I was always great to have somebody in the legal field in my life. Would you agree? No, you're going to, okay, because this is being recorded, so let's not say that. Anyway, so fast forward real quick. So he was able to be the prosecutor. He starts running for that office. Doug was a very private person. And so talk about what was next in his story.
So he was elected prosecutor. The election was 2018, starting January 1, 2019. In July of 2019, he was having some health issues. Nothing really serious. Thought it was probably an ulcer or something like that. Went in, had a colonoscopy, and they found a tumor, and he had colorectal cancer. So 6 months after being elected to the dream job that he always wanted professionally, like here we finally are on top of the world, and just kicked in the teeth.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, we're not going to tell anybody. We are going to keep this to ourselves. I'm going to go in and have this surgery, and we're going to roll on down the road.
Yeah.
And he had a family history, but because of what happened in 91, there was a lot of scattered relations with family on both sides. And on his mom's side, there's a history of colorectal cancer. And he didn't know that, so he wasn't obviously, having screenings or anything like he should have, because it's just not something you talk about.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in your 20s, you're
Yeah.
healthy, and you're not going
Yeah.
to the doctor and doing all of those things. So here we are. He goes in November of 19 and has surgery. And when they operate on your colon like that, you have to have an ileostomy, which was very difficult for him to deal with mentally. It was mentally draining on him. So he was like, that thing's got to get reversed as soon as possible. And we had the surgery for that. And then he was in remission. We did some treatment. We did chemo for a little while, and he was in remission, and all was good. Until December of 21, he started having just routine screenings, that they make you do. And in December of 21, it came back in his liver, and we thought that was it. Like, we're done. I mean, at that time, he's like, okay, it's 1. And as soon as it metastasized to his liver, they consider it stage 4 colorectal cancer. So if you start reading statistics on stage 4 colorectal cancer, they're not good. 5-year survival rate's not very good.
And meanwhile, he's still wanting to kind of keep this under wraps. Like he was a very private person. He knew that it might affect his career, being a voted in elected official. And so, and being in law, it could be used against him. And he knew that. He knew these risks. And so he wanted to keep it very private, didn't he?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
To the point of even keeping it from family.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of people maybe in our families who knew anything.
Yeah.
Our girls did not know, because they didn't want to burden the girls with, something might be wrong with dad, so we didn't tell the girls, So going through these surgeries and trying to find childcare, and people don't know why, and you can't tell them, was kind of a struggle for us. So in December of 21, when it came back in his liver, we went and saw a surgeon, and he said, we can cut that out.
Yeah.
He said, we can do surgery. And he said, I want you to go to Barnes. There's a really great surgical oncologist up there. Mm-hmm. So we went up there. We spent May of 22, we spent a week at Barnes, and they sliced him open, sliced him open, and took out a good portion of his liver. We were up there for a week, and then remission.
Yeah. So each time this happens, there's a little bit more hope. Like, he has hope. He's like, I think we beat this thing. I think we beat this thing. I think we beat this thing. And so he's wanting to just kind of keep it probably quiet so we can beat it and go on with his career that he's waited his whole life and worked his whole life to become.
Right.
Yeah. But then
Comes back again. And this time it was a tumor on his spine. And, in the beginning it was, back pain. Had some screenings. Okay, it's a tumor. And radiation oncologists, they're like, we'll radiate it.
Yeah.
And they did, and it worked great
Yeah.
for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then comes back again.
So at some point, they said, there's probably not much more we
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to chemo medicines, I mean, there's only so many that work for different things and so many you can go through. And so, every time we're slowly, going through this one and going through that one. And,
Yeah.
you know that at some point you might reach the end. You're just hoping that maybe science catches up with you and you just keep trying new
Breakthrough.
ones. Yeah. So the second time the tumor came back on his spine, the radiation oncologist said, I do not want to radiate it again. Let's just try to do pain management, because I'm afraid if I keep radiating it, I'm going to get into something, get into your spine, and you will not be able to walk anymore.
Yeah.
So we did pain management, which was really difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when things really started getting hard.
Yeah. So throughout my friendship with Dub, he would text me from time to time, and one of the things that I remember him telling me was when he would call, and I, Charlie, I told you this last service too, but there were moments where I thought, I'm going to have this conversation with Dub. We're really going to talk about his faith. We're going to talk about his forgiveness. We're going to talk about his soul. And each time he would just say, well, my wife and the kids, the girls, they're going to church and they're doing great. And it was always Charlie and the girls, Charlie and the girls, Charlie and the girls going to church. And each time I was like, I want to ask about him, but I knew he had all this trauma and this PTSD, and I knew that he had issues with even coming in and sitting in a church. So I just prayed. I began to pray, and I just said, God, I want to have this conversation with him. So if you'll open the door, I will walk through. If you'll do it, I'll have the conversation with him. And one day he called me, and he would call me every once in a while and say, when we were into cars. If you were at the tire shop, you were into cars, you loved cars, and Dub was a Mustang guy. I was a Mustang guy. Growing up, we had pictures of cars on our bedroom walls, and it was always a competition. Oh, where'd you find that picture of that Mustang? And whatever, he was so into them. And so when he would get a Shelby or his dream car, he would get something, he would call me and say, hey, we're going for a ride. And I'm like, this is going to be fun. He would pull in, I would see it, we'd go for a ride. But this day was different, and I knew it was. And it was about February of last year. He calls me, and he said, Polly, are you at your office? And I said, yes. And he said, I'm getting ready to drive by. Is anybody else there? Because he was really private. And I said, I think Tony's here, but I think he's in the other part of the building, so I'll just come out and meet you. And he said, okay, I'm pulling in now. So I ran to the front door, and he gets out of the car, and I could see right away that he was not well. He wasn't walking well. He wasn't moving well, and he didn't look good. And I opened the door, and he walks in, and we go into my office, and we close the door, and he takes off his jacket, he sets it down, and he said, Polly, I'm dying. And he just began crying. And as soon as he closed that door, I knew that God had just opened the door. And so I moved my chair up to him, I put my hand on his leg, and I said, let's talk about this, Dub. And he said, well, I'm dying, and I want you to do the service, and I know who I want the pallbearers to be. I know what I want in the service. And I said, man, that's all great, but Dub, let's talk about your soul. And he said, I knew you were going to ask that. And we talked about his mom. We talked about how he had forgiven his mom, and we talked about his faith. And then I prayed with him, and I knew as soon as we were done praying, Dub was in the right place. He was in a hard place, but he was in the right place, right where God wanted him. It wasn't long after that he went into the hospital, and he would never come home.
Right. So the tumor, in a matter of 5 days or so, had grown big enough that it was putting pressure on something important, and his legs essentially quit working. So we went in for a regular oncology appointment, knowing that they would send us probably to the emergency rooms. We'd get an MRI and kind of figure out what was going on. We all knew it was the tumor on his spine.
Yeah.
And so they had to sedate him to do the MRI. So I'm sitting in the waiting room at the hospital waiting, to hear something, and they call my name out, and they're like, a neurosurgeon will come out and speak with you. And I'm like, oh, that's a new one for my Dr. Bingo card, is a neurosurgeon, because we haven't talked to one of those before. And so I go back and speak with him, and he's like, we have to do the surgery. I understand, elephant in the room, your husband has cancer, but he's got this, tumor on his spine, and we need to do surgery on it if there's any hope that, he's going to get use back in his legs. And I said, okay. And he said, I said, when are we going to schedule that? And he said, as soon as a room opens, we've got to get in there.
Now.
And I said, okay. what does he say? He said, oh, he says, do it. And I said, okay. And he said, but I need you to know this is not going to be an easy surgery. He was like, this is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult recovery. He cannot receive any, cancer treatment while, healing from surgery.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, can I talk to him? And so they take me back to the back room, and there he is, kind of dopey, coming out of sedation. And I'm like, are you sure that you want to do this? And he said, yeah. And I said, this is not going to be easy.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, he'd been sliced open so many times in the last 4 years, I've lost count. And he said, we've been at the end of the road for a long time, so we're just going to keep on plowing through.
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
And that was him. Like, he fought. His whole life he fought. We've all seen him just continue to fight, and he just kept fighting. And the thing that broke my heart so much is one time in these conversations, as this is coming up, and after he came to my office, our relationship went to a whole nother level. And we were texting back and forth. And I remember him telling me things like, Paulie, you'll never know what it's like to, you may never know what it's like to try to act like everything is okay in your life and be in a courtroom and do your job, and then, during a recess, you go into the bathroom, you puke your guts out, and you walk back out and act like everything is okay. And I was just compelled in that moment. I said, Dub, you're telling me this stuff. Does your wife and your daughters know that you're going through this? Like, if it were me, I would, and my father was going through this, I would want to know the pain that he went through. I would want to know that he was a fighter. And I said, Dub, you've read every book there ever was. Have you ever written your story? And he goes, wow, I never have. I think I will. And he said he began to write some of those things down for his daughters to read someday. I was compelled to do that. And so we're down to the last bit. We come now I'm getting updates that he's into the hospital, and this is probably it. So I start every day. I would go get my kids from school. I work all day, go get my kids, drop them off, and I'd go straight up to the hospital. And we did that for a long time. And they've given you this ultimatum that he's either going to die here or he's going to die at home. You didn't think that you could, you're like, it's better to be around nurses and here, right? I mean, then what
he would never go on hospice.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just like, that was just him to the very end.
Yeah.
The day we met with his oncologist and the nurse practitioner from his office, and they're like, Mr. Dustin, your organs are shutting down. And he's like, okay. And they're like, which his oncologist is like, we have talked about hospice, because they did talk back in January of 23. And we were like, why are you talking about this with us? We're okay. We're playing whack-a-mole. Everything's okay. We're managing.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, do you think, you've spent these so many weeks here at the hospital, would it have been better to be home? And he said, well, maybe, but I had to keep trying.
Yeah.
And even at the very end, I mean, they've told us your organs are shutting down. He's like, okay. And they're like, do you want to go home? We can put you on hospice and move you to a different part of the hospital. He's like, I'm fine where I'm at. He just would never admit defeat.
No, he wouldn't. And he just kept fighting. I remember one day that I came up to the hospital, and you had been there for so long, and you and your sister Maddie, you guys left, and it was just Dub and I. And every time you would sit with him in the hospital bed, he wanted to hold your hand, no matter who you were. I remember you sitting there holding his hand, your brother's hand, as he was dying. And he just wanted to hold your hand. So he held my hand, and he's kind of closing his eyes, and I thought he's taking a little nap. And then he just looks at me, and he goes, how great thou art. And I go, excuse me? He said, how great thou art. I said, it's a great song. He said, I want it in my service. And I said, okay, I got it. I got it. We'll have that in your service. And he closes his eyes. He leans his head back, and then he goes, then sings my soul. He starts singing. I go, oh, we're singing. Like, we're going to sing this. And so I join in with him, and I'm like harmonizing, and he's singing, and we get to the end, and he leans his head back, and I was like, wow, that was a cool moment. And then he goes, then sings my soul. And he's right back into it. I go, we're going to do this again. Let's sing this. And I've never felt what I felt in that moment, because here is a guy who is fighting for his life. He's dying, and he's saying, "Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great you are."
I
great
didn't
you
tell
are.
anybody. We didn't talk about this in the first service, but one night while we were there, I was going to leave, and he grabbed my hand, and he said, "Let me pray." And that was not something we did, you know. And I was like, okay. And he prayed on and on and on about, thank you for sending me a godly woman.
Yeah, I know. Well, Charlie, let me say this, and we've all talked about this, about you. I truly believe that, to tell the rest of the story, Dub passed, and he left this life. But I truly believe that the reason Dub is in heaven today, the reason that Dub came to that place in faith, is because of you. You showed him the faith. You showed him, you pushed him in places that nobody else could push him. You took him to places that nobody else could take him. And I got to see that firsthand in your life. And I'm thankful that he met you. And let me just brag on this girl, because she continued to fight with him, not against him, but with him against cancer. And to the point to where when it came up to that last moment, this girl puts a worship song that God had shown her and had gotten through to you. She puts it on her phone, and Dub's taking his last breaths of life, and you're worshiping God with your husband in his last breaths. And that moved me so much. And then he took his last breaths, and we all gathered around him as a family. And I prayed a prayer that I don't even remember, because I didn't know what to do. It was in that moment, and I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. This is not good. This is not what we wanted. This is not what we prayed for. But here we are. What do we do with this?
I always prayed for healing.
Yeah.
I said in the
Yeah.
first service, in November of 22, probably about mid-November, I heard a whisper, and all it said was 2023. And I thought, 2023, okay, that's the year we get healing. That is the year of healing. I wasn't sure what that healing was going to look like, earthside or not. But I remember at Thanksgiving thinking, like those things that might bother you. Yeah, this is probably our last Thanksgiving. It's not that big of a deal. Christmas, probably our last Christmas. And I remember his birthday in January. It was on a Monday. And he was like, let's go to Wilson's Creek. And I said, babe, I really need to work. Because I had been out of work a lot, I've sat in the hospital with a laptop working remotely. Thank goodness for COVID to allow a lot of remote working to happen. And I said, I just don't know. And my boss said, go. And I said, okay. And I'm so thankful, because that was probably the last time that he and I got to just go do something. Yeah. He and I, while he was still able to climb around the battlefield a little bit, so I'm thankful for that. But it was on my heart, and I feel like God put it on my heart because he knew I couldn't, this can't just happen. She's got to have a little warning. He needs
preparing your heart.
Yeah, I need to be prepared.
Wow. So powerful. He's so good and so gracious, and which I want to move on to the next part, which is so amazing that you guys have been so patient over here sitting, because now this next part involves you, because we're at the service. We've planned this service. Dub knew exactly what he wanted in that service, and we honored him and did what he wanted. He was in heaven with Jesus, but in that service, y'all came because he was your friend, and you came to honor him and to be with Charlie and be with the family. And when you came, something happened to y'all. And I just want to, real quick, starting with you, I started with you last time, Jeff, but I want to start with you because I hadn't connected with you in years. I don't know that we ever said anything since high school. And then with you, we've had some conversations over the years when we would see each other at funerals or whatever, and we would say, hey, good to catch up, good to see you. But that was about it. It's kind of surface level. But now you guys came to this service and something happened to where you guys reached out to me after the service and you said, Harriet, you started with me and you said, hey, have you, do you baptize people like outside of church? And I go, yeah, we love to do that. And you're like, will you come and baptize my husband and I? And you had said, do you have week services and like weekly, do you have midweek services? Because we work on Sunday, my husband works on Sunday, so we can't be there on Sunday. Do you have midweek service? I remember I went to Tony and I was like, hey, we got to have a midweek service because there's people that want to have a midweek service. And then the next week, I saw you here. And I was like, hold up. So talk a little bit about all that.
Well, I'll start. I didn't say this in the first service, but when you actually told the story about how when he was on his deathbed, dealt his last card, he knows his outcome, and he breaks down how great thou art. I remember bawling like a baby in the middle of the service. If it weren't for that, I don't know that I'd even be here right now. And that kind of led to...
Yeah, go ahead. Your turn.
The service just had such an impact on all of us. It touched us. We didn't have Sundays off, so we watched online until we were able to. The week after we asked to be baptized, his schedule changed and we got Sundays off. Wow. It was just
I know, I see you here and I'm like, wait a minute, I thought you worked on Sundays. And you're like, crazy thing.
Yeah, and so we started coming every Sunday, which was hard for us because we'd tried so many other churches when we used to have Sundays off, and this place was just so welcoming. We felt like it was family already, and so it was a huge thing for us because we'd been going through a really hard time. We had religious people really close to us hurt us deeply, and we were lost, and I was a wreck.
You don't want anything to do with church.
No, it was, we kind of did our own thing.
Yeah.
So it changed our lives, and it all started with Dub's funeral.
That's amazing. You when you contacted me, you said, can you come and like baptize? You guys had a plan. Like I've never met anybody, like you're like, we're going to get on the boat, we're going to go to this place, we know where we want to be baptized. You built a cross out of wood. It was so cool, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you're hammering it in the ground. You're like, this is what we're going to do. We're talking about Jesus. Well, when I get there, I hadn't seen you in forever, and you and Christy and some friends and Renee and all these friends that just showed up to be with.
We didn't know they were coming.
Yeah, you didn't know they were coming either. And they had heard about your baptism, and they wanted to be there too. And we had church on that boat. It was awesome. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I actually heard from a mutual friend of ours, Christy, who Harriet had talked to Christy, and she said, hey, Harriet and Keith are going to get baptized. Do you think that you could take off work and go with us? And anyone that knows me very well knows that I'm kind of a workaholic, or I was a workaholic. And for me, it was like a big deal in my life to take that many hours off work to go do it. But I'm so glad I did.
Yeah.
Because we were all able to reconnect. And, you know, Jeff and I had talked after we had been to Dub's funeral, and I think I told you that day at the graveside and then here over and over and over how much, it sounds weird, but this is the best funeral I've ever been to. And it was the best funeral because it just touched on so many ways of who Dub was, and the things that people said, and how we felt here. Like it was like we were with family going through that whole thing. And then I told Jeff, I was like, you're not ever going to believe this, but I was like, Harriet and Keith are getting baptized tomorrow, and I'm going to take off work and go. And he was like, really? Like they are? And we had kind of talked about, you know, if we were going to go to church, that church would probably be one we would like to try. But really until they took the initiative and said, no, we're going. We're going to start going. Well, of course, our reaction was, well, we'll do that after boating season's over with. After lake season's over with. So anyway, we're just really glad that we came. And we have felt so welcome here. It's so nice to reconnect with, like, Mindy, for example, and to see her sweet parents here, to see your parents here last week, and to get to visit with them.
Because we all used to go to church together.
Yeah.
We were and here we are again.
Yeah, and I think what's different about this now is that, like, I'm not ready for this sermon to be over, where when I was in church as a kid, I couldn't wait for it to be over.
Except for today, you're ready for this to be over. Jeff, you don't. No, I want you to talk a little bit, man, because here's the thing. Like you two, as we were sitting in a circle, I'm telling you, these people, they want they're successful business people. I'm up here with every one of them, and they're like, so do you have a plan? And I was like, well, we're just going to talk like we're in a living room. And they're like, that's not okay. And so because you wanted some direction and stuff, I go, Jeff, here's the bottom line. When you came to that funeral that day, did you go, man, I need a church to start going to?
Well, I wasn't looking for a church.
You were?
I mean, I was going to Dub's funeral, and it was here, and this room was there wasn't an empty chair in here, and a lot of people I knew, and listening to Paul talk about Dub and his life, it was just this touching moment. And like, what really got me was when you told the story and you said it's calling Polly, and I don't have a Polly to call, you know. I'm like, that hit me. I don't know, there was something that day that I guess I was thinking, you know, what would I do if something, I guess I was kind of placing myself in that position, and or something happened to Rachel or me, and who would I call, what would I do? I'm not going to church, and I don't know, that just kind of maybe I feel like Dub, through you, got us here, or maybe through God got us here.
Right.
But, you know, your message spoke pretty deeply to me to walk through that door and follow you guys in here, and I'm just glad that we did, so.
Jeff, you have a Polly now, buddy.
Good, yeah, and so if I ever call you and I say Polly, there's a problem.
Okay. I'm there for you.
Okay.
I'm there for you. It's so amazing, y'all. As we told the first service that you never know. Like, you can go through life, and we don't know where we are in life. We don't know what chapter we're in, but God has scripted it all. And for us to look back and go, we had no idea that we would be in church together, let alone on this stage together, you know?
Dub wasn't what you would call your traditional soldier of Christ.
No.
And yet, the number of people that I know he has touched, just the service. Like, you wonder why things happen.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot over the last 9 months that it's like, I know this story didn't end the way I wanted it to, but I know why the story was. Wow. I think. You know, like,
So good.
it's bigger than us.
It is. It is bigger than us. Jason, you and I were talking this week. You were just kind of going, so what's this going to look like? And I just kind of told you, and you go, man, there's just so much. Like, life doesn't end at life, and life doesn't end at death. There's more to life, and there's more to death. And I was like, when you said that, I was like, dang, that is good. You want to preach? Because that is so good. And I was just like, this is why we're telling this story. This is why we're all here. There is so much more to your story, and our stories are not done. This is just a part of it. We don't know what chapter we're in, and your story is not done. You don't know what chapter you're in. God is still writing it, and we're just riding the wave, y'all. He's creating the wave, and we're riding it. And so I just want to encourage you all. I don't know that there's any more thing we can say unless anybody wants to say anything. I don't want to.
The only thing I want to say,
yeah.
just because I had someone come up to me after first service and they said, please, they're like, it was so good, but the only thing you left out, I just want to take an opportunity to say, if something doesn't feel right, go to the doctor.
Yeah, for real.
Pre-screenings.
Yeah.
Colorectal pre-screenings start at age 45 now, not 50. If you think that something is just not right, because I can tell you with my husband, there wasn't a lot. Like, some people, there's huge symptoms. He was passing a little bit of blood. Didn't they, like I said, probably thought it was an ulcer, not a big deal. He was 44 years old, you know. Well, it was a big deal. Mm-hmm. So somebody said, just mention that, because they had a family member also going through colorectal cancer treatment, and just do your pre-screenings.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'll preach about that next week. And I'm going to preach about that, and I'm going to preach about that. Okay? So come back next week. Everybody come back after the Chiefs win the Super Bowl tonight, and we will be here again, and we'll do this. And I'm just so thankful. Thank you guys for coming and telling this story. Even though this is uncomfortable, it was a story worth telling. Wouldn't you agree, church? Yeah, wouldn't you? Yeah. So I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to get out of here and head on to Super Bowl things. And I told the first service, I haven't, every time I prayed for the Chiefs, they've won. So I'm going to pray for them too. So, because God cares. God, you're so good. You're so faithful. We stand in awe at what you are doing and what you are writing. And so, God, just allow us to see it. Allow us to recognize it. Allow us to know that you love us. You're always with us, and you have an amazing plan for our lives. And so, God, would you help us to make those choices and make different choices, God, to have a poly in our life, to commit to friendships and family, and to maybe if something's holding us back today and walls are built up, God, I ask you to tear down those walls so that we can live life now to the fullest that you have called us to. Be with these people up here today, God. Their words and their story does not fall in vain, but it gives you glory, God, in what you are doing in our lives. The story is not over. It's just begun. So continue to do what you do, what only you can do. Heal what only you can heal. God, we love you. And God, would you please be with the Chiefs tonight? One more game. That's all I ask, God. One more game. We love you, Jesus, and it's in your name we pray. And we all say? Amen. Hey, have a great week. Thanks for coming out today.